Halloween season was in full swing on Sodor, which brought about one of the engine's favourite traditions, ghost stories. And every year, on the date of the accident, it plunges into the gap shrieking like a blah blah blah. We've all heard this story before. Get some new material, Percy. Look, Thomas, it's not exactly easy to come up with a good ghost story that won't get laughed away before it's even finished. I'd like to see what you can come up with. Well, since you insisted on telling one tonight, I wouldn't want to deprive you of the honour. Besides, my story would just, scare you too much. Oh, is that so? Very much so. Wouldn't want to traumatise you or anything. Go on then, tell it. Don't worry about me. I can handle... I've got one. You? You've got a good ghost story? Well, good is subjective, but I don't doubt it'll be interesting at the very least. Well then, you've got my attention. I give it 5 minutes before we've been bored into wanting my story again. Shush, I want to hear this. Take it away, Toby. Well, this story takes place many years ago on a railway far, far away from ours. There was a large diesel engine who worked on a small branch that served a harbour and a scrapyard. No one can remember the diesel's actual name, however at some point people began calling him Diesel 10. He was, by all accounts, a kind soul, who worked hard and was friendly to all his comrades, even the steam engines. He mainly worked at the scrapyard, pulling trucks to and fro as needed. Though his performance was by no means lacking, the manager of the scrapyard had an idea for a modification that would make Diesel 10 even more efficient. A modification that was both legally and morally questionable. One morning, the men showed up for work as usual, and were surprised to find that Diesel 10 had been outfitted with a large mechanical claw. It was the manager's own design, an experimental one, made for loading and unloading scrap, as well as clearing obstacles from the line as needed. The claw was certainly met with some controversy. Many people argued whether such a modification could or should be made, but what they'd failed to realise, however, was how the claw was affecting its engine. It said that the claw changed Diesel 10. What do I mean by that, you may ask? Well, the kind, gentle giant diesel everyone had come to love over the years began to fade away, and in its place, a new persona dawned, though this one not nearly as comforting. He became reclusive, angry, and spiteful. He'd frequently lash out at the workmen, and the steam engines. Oh my, he could make even the toughest steam engine's boiler run cold on the hottest of days. He'd hurl insults and threats at them, telling them how obsolete they were, and how diesels were destined to take over. He'd make the sick offer to be the one who personally tore the engines apart when their day to be scrapped came. He became an all-around menace. People concluded that the claw must be what was corrupting him, and they began pressuring the scrapyard's manager to remove it once and for all. But he stood by his decision, claiming the claw worked like a charm and made the work quicker. Over time, however, he would come to regret his decision. Late one night, a little engine had to make a late-night delivery to the scrapyard. They were nervous. A trip to the scrapyard meant they'd surely encounter Diesel 10, right? Well, upon entering the yard, it seemed to the little engine that that wouldn't be the case, for the menacing diesel was nowhere to be seen. It was a misty night though, which limited how far the little engine could see. They shunted their trucks into a siding, and were just about to leave, when they suddenly heard a low rumble. They looked over, and saw a massive claw coming straight for them. The next morning, the men arrived for work once again, and were horrified by what they saw. There was Diesel 10, looking as evil as ever, staring coldly down at the remains of the little engine. He'd torn them down to pieces, and now all that remained were jagged shards of metal. Everyone was shocked and outraged. They all blamed the manager. "You could have prevented it," they'd say. Realizing he had no other choice, the manager scrapped Diesel 10 in disgrace. It wouldn't be enough to save his scrapyard though, for with all the negative publicity surrounding it, nobody wanted to do business there. The scrapyard was shut down not long after, and now with one of its two served industries closed, the branch followed closely behind. Diesel 10 was quickly forgotten about, and nowadays most consider him a legend over someone who really existed. However, some say that on a dark, misty night, Diesel 10 is still out roaming the rails, flying down the main line through the fog with his claw flailing like mad, creeping through the sidings, waiting at the back of the shed. He haunts the railways, looking for a steam engine who's a suitable next victim. And if you aren't careful, maybe it will be you. Wow, that was actually really good. Like, really good. Yeah, good job, Toby. Where'd you hear that one at? Oh, I don't know. Probably a workman or station master some time ago. Nice. Too bad it's easily the most fake story I've ever heard, because it's actually pretty intriguing. Fake? What makes you say that? A huge diesel with a claw. Come on, do you actually have any idea how illegal that is? If someone actually tried that, they'd have so many legal issues on their hands, they'd be sorry they ever tried it. Interpret the story how you will, but you know how ghost stories tend to go. The non-believers are always the ones they go after first. Yeah, Percy, you'd better watch your bunker, otherwise you might end up with a claw poking into it. Yeah, whatever. The next day, Thomas found himself waiting at the platform for his passengers to board. Fog had rolled in from the sea, which with the context of the previous night's story seemed eerier than ever. As he waited, Thomas heard a low rumbling sound, and then Boko flew by with a goods train. Thomas jumped back, startled. Then he heard chuckling coming from the yard adjacent. What's the matter, Thomas? You think Diesel 10's coming for you? I shouldn't be surprised. You are the engine with a tendency for being scared out of your frames. Let me in! Let me in! Percy said mockingly as he puffed away, leaving Thomas feeling rather embarrassed. Percy was feeling quite pleased with himself. For the rest of the day, whenever he'd pass Thomas, Percy would taunt and laugh at him. Ooh, look out for the ghost diesel, Thomas! Oh, I've damn near had it with Percy's arrogance. I'll bet you he wouldn't be so confident if he really saw that diesel. That's just how Percy is. I'd reckon you'd do the same to him if you were in his position. You've just got to put up with it for a day or so. He'll get tired of it soon enough. Thomas could only hope so. What neither of them realised, though, was that they wouldn't have to wait as long as they'd thought. That night, Percy was set to take the post train. He'd simmered happily at the harbour, waiting for his vans to be loaded. It didn't take long, and soon he steamed out of the harbour. The run along the misty line went smoothly. He made his stops at Tidmouth and Crosby, and was now bound for Wellsworth. The viaduct loomed ahead, and Percy felt the heavy winds pick up as he began to cross. Then, rather unexpectedly, Percy's brakes were slammed hard on, bringing him to a quick stop in the middle of the viaduct. Percy was confused. "Driver, why have we stopped?" He received no answer. In the distance, a clock tower struck 10. Percy felt nervous now. He began to feel the rails vibrating, and a low rumbling sound was heard in the distance. And then the following morning, Edward arrived with the breakdown train and the Fat Controller. "Percy, are you all right?" Percy didn't answer. He just sat there, a haunted look on his face. "Percy, what happened here last night?" I think he's in shock, sir." "I think you're right, Edward. I'd like to know what from, though." "Ugh. What happened here?" "Well, I was hoping you could answer that." "I don't know. The last thing I remember was us starting to cross the viaduct. Next thing I know, I've just woken up in a bush with the fireman. My head feels all sorts of foggy, like the worst hangover of my life." "I second that. I feel awful, and I have no clue what's happened here." I see. And what of the guard?" "The guard? He wasn't with us, I don't think. Maybe he's still in the..." Oh my God! There, sitting where the brake van should have been, was a splintered pile of wood and metal. It was all that was left of it. What happened?" I don't know, and it seems the only one who can tell us that is unable to speak at the moment. We'd better get this cleaned up. Edward, after the van's ruins have been dealt with, take Percy and his mail vans back to Tidmouth. Let him rest for a while. It looks as though he needs it." "Yes, sir." Edward left Percy in the branch-line sheds, and then quietly puffed away to let him rest. As Percy sat there in the shed, he found himself lost in his own thoughts. He couldn't process what had happened to him. He wasn't even sure whether he was dreaming or not. His grip on reality was hazy, and all he could do for now was hope that, in time, he'd find a way to make sense of it all. So let this be a lesson to all of you. Never take the subject of the supernatural lightly. Otherwise, there's no telling what could happen.